G'day guys, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to talk about the 139 grain GMX versus the 162 grain ELDX. So before we crack into what we normally talk about, which is all the energy ratings and showing you what it looks like going through a samber shoulder and all that, we're going to talk about how we got to where we're at and why I decided to change my bullets. So let's rewind to this time last year. I went out on my fallow hunt. I do a yearly fallow hunt for the rut. And I had some dramas with the ELDX. The first thing I'll briefly touch on is the zero of my rifle, which really did let me down. Now, on paper, a really long point blank range zero seems like a very good idea, particularly when in this particular area I can shoot it to about 300 meters. So in my mind, doing a longer point blank range meant that I could just hold and pull the trigger and I would hit the target. What that meant was that my max ordinate, my highest my rounds were going above my line of sight, was about 3.5 inches. Now, when you think about a 10-inch target being the chest cavity of a deer, and then you're like, well, 3.5 inches is still within that, so that's pretty good. However, when you take into account small deer, they're very close, and you also fuck the shot. I ended up putting rounds over the top of shoulders, which absolutely shit me to tears, and I lost a massive stonker. This big clefty boy here, I was stalking him for a couple of days, had an opportunity. He was at about 70 to 80 meters away. Because I was sighted in so high, I also went for a high shoulder shot because I'm an idiot. And long story short, it grazed his back, went straight over the top, and he ran away. Now, about 15 to 20 minutes after that happened, I had a little spiker come through, and I'd already known that, hey, I'd shot over the top. I saw the spiker coming through the trees. I lined him up, and he was at about, I want to say, 70 meters again. I hadn't fully processed in my mind what I had just done with that stag before, so I held the same point of aim. I fired, and from what I saw through the recoil was a lot of fur go up in the air, and this deer hit the deck. As I reloaded and brought my rifle back up, I couldn't see the deer anymore. Then about 3 to 4 minutes later, I saw what appeared to be another deer off to its left moving through. I stood up, and I ended up aiming purposely at the bottom of his chest, fired, and I'm getting a perfect heart shot on that deer. Now, I thought that I'd shot two different deer. What had happened though was I'd shot the same deer twice. The first round had just grazed his back, and I actually have his skin, which is over on a table over there, grazed his back, and that first round was enough to put him on the deck, but obviously it didn't penetrate his skin, didn't go through him, it just put him on the deck, kind of knocked him out for a little bit. He got back up, and that's why he was walking sluggishly when I shot him the second time and killed him. The first thing that let me down on last year's hunt was the fact that my zero was a bit shit. I didn't practice enough with that type of zero. I've since reverted that back to 1.5 inches high at 100, which is what I'd previously had on all my rifles. That was kind of a test I wanted to do to see this maximum point blank range thing that Ron Spomer craps on about all the time, getting it to as far as I could, whether that was beneficial, and for me that was not, because I don't shoot far enough for it to be beneficial. So 1.5 inches high for a 7 rem mag roughly equates to around a 200 yard zero, so that's what I have on my rifle right now, is a 200 yard zero. The other thing that happened with the ELDXs, so that spiker that I'd shot, yes, it had gone through the heart, but there was an excessive amount of meat damage because the round fucking exploded and went everywhere. There was lead all through the chest cavity, through all the organs. You could see lead in the lungs. So a lot of that meat I had to throw in the bin because I don't feed lead to myself or my family or my fucking dogs. So a lot of that meat was wasted. The next weekend I went back to the same spot and I ended up shooting another spiker, and the same thing happened. It was a spine shot, and there was lead and shit fucking everywhere. There was no, on either of those deer, there was no exit wound, and it just cemented in my mind everything that everyone had told me about ELDXs, that they're very good for long range shooting. So we're talking like 400 meters and up. Anything below that, they're pretty shit. They're too frangible. They're just a really shitty cup and core bullet. And I paid the price by losing a lot of meat through that. From then, I decided that I was going to go to copper monolithics, and because I haven't really been using my 7 rem mag, I had not really done the switch. I've been hunting with my other rifles being my 9.3 and my 358. Now that I'm going back for fallow, the 7 Rem mag is coming back out again. And I went down the rabbit hole of loading some 139 grain GMXs because I wanted a copper monolithic bullet. I wanted it to absolutely slam these fallow at the shots I'm going to take, which is anywhere up to 300 meters, although most of the fallow I've seen this particular spot had been no further than 100 to 120. That's the long prelude done. I did a quick ladder test, so I loaded up 10 rounds, starting, well, I didn't start at the minimum charge, I started at like, I don't know, a quarter of the way up the chart, I guess, and I worked my way up to max charge. So I loaded 10 rounds up to max charge, I should say. I didn't actually fire all the way up. I got 6 rounds in, had pressure signs, and I cut the test there. The other 4 rounds got pulled apart and I reused the components. Now, of those 6 rounds, 3 of them were very close in velocity, so I'll read them out to you. We had a 3,119 feet per second, 3,123 feet per second, and 3,129 feet per second. So an extreme spread of 10 feet per second. That's over a full grain increment. So that's 71.5 grains, 72 grains, and 72.5 grains. So that was pretty good, and they all grouped near on touching each other. So I went, bugger it, I think that's me done for load testing for this, so I can go hunting with it, seeing as the rut starts next weekend, essentially. And at the time of you watching this, I will be out hunting. Well, probably the rut doesn't really start then, but you know, my hunting starts then. That's when I put my cameras out. So I loaded up 50 rounds, and then I went back out, confirmed my 0, and then I did this shoulder test. So you may have seen this video, or this type of video before, where I did 7 Rem mag versus the 358 Winchester. Now, when I did the data, if you go back and watch that video, when I did the data for the 7 Rem mag, I actually used the box velocity, which was like 29 something, 2970, I think. My gun absolutely does not shoot it that fast, and I ran these rounds over a chrono when I redid this test. I didn't reshoot another shoulder because I've only got a finite amount of shoulders in my freezer and there's other tests I want to do. But what I did do is I ran them over a chrono to make sure I had the correct velocity out of my rifle, so that way when I do the data, it is correct. So as I said, if you go back and watch that other video, just understand the data is actually incorrect for that, and this is the correct data. You'll also notice that in my previous ballistic videos, what I do is I do everything in joules, but I can't be asked doing all the maths anymore. You can do it yourself if you really want. So I'm just going to stick to foot-pounds of energy because it's easier, because the ballistics program, or the website on Hornady that I use, if you put it in feet per second, it's going to spit it out in foot-pounds. So instead of sitting there for 20 minutes, half an hour, converting all of the fucking numbers over to metric, it's just going to be an imperial. So deal with it. But also, you Yanks that are watching, you're welcome, because now you know what the bloody hell I'm talking about. But also, while we're talking about these deer, so sambar, if you hear me talking about sambar deer, is the size, or almost the size of an elk. So it's the 3rd biggest deer in the world. So you've got moose, elk, sambar is the 3rd biggest, so it's pretty fucking big. When I'm talking about fallow deer, think about a whitetail is roughly the size of a fallow deer. I think fallow are slightly bigger than whitetails from memory, but roughly in that size ballpark. So with the corrected numbers on the 162 grain ELDX, these are going to pop up on the screen. We are going at 2858 feet per second. That was the average over a 5-shot grouper that I fired out of my rifle. Now, I do tend to see that whatever the box velocity is all the time out of my rifles, whether it be a 24-inch barrel or not, and mind you, 24 inches is kind of the standard when it comes to box velocity, I'm always about 100 to 150 feet per second slower. And I believe that is because of the altitude we are at. I think that most of the time when Yanks test their stuff, particularly the factories, they're up a lot higher than we are in altitude, which does change your velocity. Because of all those meteorological influences, it's going to change your velocity, so just bear that in mind. If you're using a box velocity, it's probably incorrect. And if you have a short barrel of anything, it's definitely incorrect. Just so you know for when you want to do your own data. So at the muzzle, we're getting 2938 foot-pounds. At 100, 2645, so on and so forth. It doesn't mean anything until we have something to compare it to. So let's now bring in the 139 grain GMX. It's going out of my rifle. The average is 3123 feet per second, which is fair hooking. Now, obviously, it has a lot lower of a ballistics coefficient at 486 as opposed to 631. And as you'll see, though, the energy on the 139 grain is more. Now, it is more because it is going faster. You push something faster, you're going to get more energy. However, it does kind of drop off. So at 100 meters, they're roughly the same. So there's 10 foot-pounds between the two. So 26.45 versus 26.35, that's negligible. It's pretty much the same thing. And then when you get 200 meters, the 139 grain starts to drop off because of that BC. So 23 versus 23.70. So that's not much of a difference either. At 300 meters, we have a difference of about 130 foot-pounds. At 400 meters, that's where it really drops off. And you've got, what's that, probably another 150, 180, something like that. Anyway, it drops less in the 139 grade because it is going faster, although the BC is lower. Even at 300 meters, there is less drop. So the drop there is 5.9 inches, which is 1.9 MOA, versus 6.9 inches or 2.2 MOA. So not a great deal. It's 1 inch, but an inch is an inch, as the girls would say. So after 400 meters, that's when you're really going to see the 139 grain drop off. So I wouldn't say that the 139 grain GMX is a good bullet, either ballistically or terminally, for anything past 400 meters. But as I said, if you're going past 400, you probably want to be using an ELDX. If you're hunting under 400, you might want to consider using this 139 grain GMX. But as we all know, the energy rating means not a great deal when it actually comes to terminal ballistics. Yes, it determines how hard the target is going to get hit, but it doesn't really determine how the target, being the animal, is going to receive that penetration. We'll go through the 162 grain because you guys have seen it before, and then we'll touch on the 139 grain. So at 100 meters, which is the length I did this test at, because I feel like a lot of the YouTube bloody ballistics tests that are done at 10 meters are pretty not good, because who the fuck shoots something at 10 meters? And if you are, then you don't really care about ballistics, right? So at 100 meters, so this is 26.45 foot-pounds of energy. What happened is, yes, it did penetrate through that shoulder blade, and it did go through 6 milk jugs. However, the bullet completely disintegrated. So at the end, and this is the bullet right here, which is not much left of it, this is 79.4 grains, right? So that is a 49% weight retention. That is pretty shithouse. So there was lead all through most of the milk cartons, which is exactly what I saw on actual animals. You would have lead all through the meat and all through the organs. And for me personally, that's just not a fucking good thing. I don't like eating lead. Read somewhere sometime that, lead's probably bad for you. So I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So we know what that 162 grain's done. I've shot a couple of deer with it. I've done a test with it. I know that it's not very good at 100 meters. Let's have a look now at the 139 grain. So the 139 grain, as I said before, at 100 meters is pretty much the same energy rating, so 26.35. However, right, let's look at the damage. So there's plastic from the carton in there, or the crate I should say. That's what rib does. So when rib comes back, it goes back into the hole. That's a nice hole straight through our shoulder. Now obviously that's the exit. I did have this kind of sitting backwards, so it went in that way. Straight through the middle here. There's a tiniest bit of copper in that jug. Fucking hell, straight through all of them. Just an exit hole there. Fucking no chance of finding that. So that's the tiny bit of copper that was in the third jug. So, not much. It didn't actually leave the last one. There it is, right there. So it must have hit the back and blown it out a bit. But there it is right there. That is beautiful. It has 95% weight retention. So this weighed in at, there is a little chip here, which is one of the fins which broke off in my pocket after I picked it up, but that was attached to it when I recovered it. But that's 133 grains. So that's 95% retention. That is fucking ridiculous because that's gone through not only a shoulder, but 6 milk jugs, which is a hell of a lot of water. It's also gone through the crate. I left the milk bottles in the milk crates this time instead of taping them. And I figured the milk crate, if it did hit it, could kind of act like rib does. And it actually did. It hit directly on the milk crate and pushed exactly like it pushes bone through, which you would have seen in the other videos. It pushed milk crate through all of the milk bottles as well. So it acted kind of how I was expecting. So yes, it also hit a hell of a lot of hard plastic, punched all the way through, and once again was found in the 6th bottle. Outrageous. I'm actually really, really surprised. I thought it was going to have a little bit less weight retention. I was expecting a lot because I think Hornady does say it's usually a 90% weight retention, somewhere in that ballpark. I was surprised at how well that opened. It's actually opened very, very well in comparison to, you know, that's the other one. So it's almost the same amount of opening up, just that one weighs a hell of a lot more than the other. So I personally think that the 139 grain is going to perform a hell of a lot better on my next hunt. Now, I'm not going to have to worry about, well, I've reserved my rifle, so I'm not going to worry about point of aim shift or anything like that. Actually, speaking of point of aim shift, there's something I probably should have mentioned before. One thing I did find was that the point of aim for cold bore shot was actually a hell of a lot higher than what it was when I'd zeroed it as a group. So as a group, they were sitting 3 inches high at 100. The cold bore shot was nearly 4 inches. That was the part I forgot to mention before. So just as a point to note, I'm always learning and I'm always happy to show you guys my fuck ups so you guys learn as well. For a hunting rifle, make sure your cold bore shot is zeroed where you want it, not the group that you fire after the cold bore shot, because you don't fire groups at animals, you fire the one shot, usually. If you have a point of aim shift on the second shot, well, you're just going to have to deal with that, but you would want that first shot to hit the vitals correctly. So zero the cold bore, don't zero the group. Anyway, moving on. What I will hope for as well is full pass-throughs. Ideally, if I do hit something and it's not in a very good spot, let's say I hit it a little bit far back or a little bit far forward, a little bit high maybe, and I get a double pass-through, it's more likely going to puncture both the lungs, which is going to put that animal down quicker. But also if I've got 2 exits, or an entry and an exit, then you have more blood on the ground. It's easier for me to track, it's easier for my dogs to track. The more blood on the ground, the easier it is to find the animal, even if it does leg it up to, you know, a couple of K away. I've had it with my dogs before where I have managed to get a good blood trail because I have used a monolithic bullet, punched through both sides, and I've had a lot of blood. And this animal, it was a sambar and it went nearly 2 Ks, but because there was enough blood to track, my dogs managed to find it. So that's kind of why I'm leaning towards I want to get both. I also want to be able to hit shoulders, punch through, and still continue all the way through, which is, you know, a good thing to do. If you hit them in the shoulder, they can't fucking run. You don't lose them. We don't all shoot deer in open fields, so sometimes you've got to change your methods to work with where you are, because if it's very thick bush, you want to put it down ideally where you fucking hit it so you know where it is. But if it does walk off and lies down in the bush somewhere, you want to be able to find it. There's no point killing an animal if you're not going to recover it, because now you're just wasting. That animal didn't die for anything, and now there's fucking meat out there for nothing. Anyway, I think I've talked enough about this topic. I hope you got something out of that. I hope this opens your eyes to the possibilities of what can change when you change your bullet type. A lot of people get wrapped up in the, oh, I use this cartridge or that cartridge because of X, Y, and Z. Not many people, I think these days people are kind of more leaning into the different bullets do different things mentality. But for those of you who don't, maybe consider just broadening your horizons a little bit. Pick a different bullet, try a monolithic and see how it goes. I'm sure for most people who are hunting under 300 meters, which is probably most of you, it would probably work very, very well. So as always, I hope you got something out of that. I hope that was informative. I will see you next video, and hooroo.